Hamzambo family, welcome to the Black Fire Network 54 Correspondence Show. My name is Spikes. Happy New Year. How are things going for you and your family? I just want to welcome you to the first episode of the 54 Correspondence Show on the Black Fire Network, your media for the 21st century. I do trust that you have had a wonderful time over the holidays, enjoying your time with the family. I've also been on for a while. You know, I went up country and I was just getting to reconnect and I have some wonderful time with the family. But nonetheless, I do hope that you are keeping safe. And I do hope that above all, this particular day finds you in good health. It's actually 4 minutes past 1 p.m. in Nairobi. I would just like to know also what time it is, wherever you are at. And of course, I want to welcome you so much to yet another wonderful year. We shall continue with the same work of actually connecting our people globally, whether be it on the African continent or whether be it in the diaspora, wherever you might be. Our work really is to share information that is factual, information that you can actually also act on, and also create a collective African consciousness amongst our people. You can also call it awakening our people who are still in deep slumber. I really hope that you are well, and I really hope that you have been enjoying some of the other previous shows. If you haven't, you can actually find the episodes on the Black Fire Network website. It's www.blackhotfirenetwork.com. What time is it? Wherever you are in from, please do let me know. And of course, how has your year started? It's actually the 4th day of January, the year 2021. How has your year started? You know, how has the days been so far for the last 3 years? I believe many people have been busy trying to see what they can actually make right. You know, some of the things that did not go very well for you last year, you do have yet another opportunity for you to make them right. And I believe, you know, at the start of the year, everyone starts a year with a lot of optimism, a lot of enthusiasm. You know, it's yet another chance for you to be able to push further from where you left off last year. It's actually a good thing to be able to focus on some resolutions. I don't know if you make any resolutions yourself, but personally, I am working on myself, which is actually a good thing to consistently be a better person. I'm also hoping that this particular year, I will also be able to push forward in terms of entrepreneurship and business-wise, and also other things such as health. I believe health is a universal. Resolution that people make at the start of the year. People do say, I want to hit the gym again. At the start of the year, people do say, I want to start eating healthy again. At the start of the year, people talk about this and that, and there are so many other different resolutions that people make. But nonetheless, please do let me know if you are making any of those, or if you just want to pick up from where you left last year and try to achieve as much. Please do let me know what are your aspirations. What are your aspirations for the year? Kid, you're asking what happened to Kami. Why didn't she show up for work today? She told me she was in the hospital this morning, and she's not able really to turn up to work today as well. And I'm just wishing her quick recovery. She says she hasn't been feeling well, and therefore she couldn't get to work today, which is unfortunate at the start of the year. Not feeling very, very well. But nonetheless, we wish her a quick recovery, and we do hope that she gets treated and recovers swiftly. And nonetheless, I was talking about the New Year's resolutions, and I was saying that personally, there are some universal New Year resolutions. Some of them include health. Some of them also include financial resolutions. I do know that many of us really are also trying to make some wise decisions when it comes to finances and strategizing this year. And therefore, it's actually a good thing, to get your finances in order at the start of the year. So that midway or halfway through the year, you do not just start looking back and saying, okay, I wish I had planned better at the start of the year. When it comes, even there are some lessons that you have picked up also from last year. 2020 was a tough year for most, and there are so many lessons perhaps that you might have picked up from last year that you want to implement this year. I would also like to know what are your aspirations this particular year, and also I would just also like to know what are some of the lessons that you learned in 2020 that perhaps are still very, very, very much applicable in this new year. Like I said, I would like you to check out our website. It's www.blackwatchfirenetwork.com. And once you are on the website, I would also urge you to create your own personal profile. It's very, very easy for you to do so. Creating a profile doesn't even take you so long. It's actually a minute. It takes you a minute to create a profile on the official website, which is www.blackwatchfirenetwork.com. And of course, even as you start this new year, I want to appreciate everyone that has supported the network in various ways, even through 2020. Like I said, 2020 wasn't so easy. And I also believe in this particular year, we are still not yet out of the woods. There are still some things that are, not really haven't been set straight when it comes to, the way things are going. For example, right here in Nairobi, the issue with the curfews and the restrictions have been extended. The curfew has been extended until March 12th. And that is why I'm saying we are still not yet out of the woods. But nonetheless, we have seen tremendous support from the family. And I want to appreciate everyone that has been supporting the Black Watch Fire Network, Your support is not in vain. And of course, we cannot do this work without your support. That is why we do want to acknowledge your support. And, even this particular year, we also want to invite your support, even as we seek to go much more further in the work that we are doing with the network. And also, I want to acknowledge the work that Kid has been putting in. Kid has actually put in a lot of work, even without putting up this particular platform. Right now, as it is, we also do have a correspondent from Ghana. We also do have a correspondent from Uganda. Earlier on last year, we also did have a correspondent from Zimbabwe. And therefore, we are still trying to stretch, stretch. I will not call them wings, but you're still trying to grow the network so that you can be able to, reach much more people, even right here on the continent, and even reach more people globally. And that is the work that we are doing with the Black Watch Fire Network. In case you do have some questions, I always keep inviting your questions. You can actually send through your questions and also your comments, your feedback to our official channels through, for example, social media. We are on Instagram, Black Watch Fire Network. You can also drop us a mail, blackwatchfireafrica@gmail.com. You can also send us an email, spikes@blackwatchfirenetwork.com. And there are so many other different channels that you can be able to use to get through to us as the network. And we do appreciate your support. We do appreciate your questions. We do appreciate your views regarding the network. And we hope that through your support, And through your suggestions, we can also be able to do the work in a much better way. And that is why we are the Black Coat Fire Network. Today, I want to talk about what is happening in a nation which is known as Mozambique. Mozambique is an African country, and Mozambique has been relatively safe. Mozambique has been relatively safe from the insurgency till around 2018. And we shall be delving into this particular matter. But before we go into the issue of Mozambique and what is happening and why it's important that other neighboring countries do not, look the other way and assume that things are not going wrong in Mozambique, because the area that we shall be talking about today is known as Cabo Delgado. And Cabo Delgado is the northern part of Mozambique, which is near the Tanzania border. This is the place that we are talking about. And therefore, this is also a problem not just for Mozambique, it's also a problem for Tanzania. And we shall be discussing the issue and what has been really the matter in this particular area. We shall also be talking about the matters of natural gas, which is one of the resources found in Mozambique, and why people have not benefited much. The Mozambicans have not benefited much from these natural gas resources. It has been fighting time and over again. When it comes to the 54 Correspondence show, this is a matter we come to discuss different issues that are taking place on the African continent. And we do not purpose really to just bring the negative situation, the negative stories coming from the African continent. We also do purpose to bring you some stories with positivity on the 54 Correspondence show. But nonetheless, before we get to the matter of Mozambique, I just want to highlight some African history. And this history is a history that I have shared before. And I do share the history of the nation known as the DRC, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, because I believe this is a nation that has a lot of resources. And it's one of the most, let me just call it it's the most endowed when it comes to natural resources on the continent of Africa. It has cobalt, it has diamonds, it has oil, it has so many other resources that you might think of. You'll find all these resources in the DRC Congo, but there has been a lot of fighting. And one of the challenges that the DRC Congo also faces is the issue of leadership. These two issues go hand in hand. Insecurity, leadership, economic deprivation, all these issues go hand in. They are sort of interlinked or interconnected. But today I want to share with us briefly on the history of the former president of the DRC Congo, who is known as Mobutu Sese Seko. Mobutu Sese Seko at some point was the world's richest president, the richest president in the world. Mobutu Sese Seko, he was named as the richest president in the world. But if you look at the richest president in the world and look at the reality on the ground, look at how the people are living, the living standards of the people in the DRC, you realize that there is a very, very big disconnect. The president himself was living in lavish palaces, while the people continue to suffer in anguish in these, in poverty-stricken neighborhoods, in slums and other areas like that. And this is a little bit of the history of the former president known as Mobutu Sese Seko, who was the president of the DRC Congo, which is a nation that is the most endowed when it comes to resources, but still people are living in poverty in the DRC.
How he managed. Many countries in Africa and the Caribbean suffer under kleptocratic regimes where the country is controlled and run for the benefit of an individual or a small group who use their power to transfer a large fraction of the society's resources to themselves. The 32-year rule of the Congo by Mobutu was the biggest kleptocracy in Africa that made him the world's richest head of state. In this episode, we shall look at the rise and fall of Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire and how he managed to rule and plunder the Congo for 32 years. Joseph Desire Mobutu was the second and longest-serving president of the DRC, the biggest country in sub-Saharan Africa and one of the world's poorest and longest-suffering. He committed numerous human rights atrocities and enriched himself, his family, and friends on the wealth of the country, while its citizens suffered from widespread poverty. His rise and a long span in power are mostly attributed to the support he received from the United States of America because of his anti-communist stand, even though the West was fully aware of his action.
Good grammar and spelling are important, but if you want to write essays that inspire...
Mobutu was a member of the Bandi ethnic group, born in 1930 in Lisara, Belgian Congo. His mother, Malimendelin Yemo, was a hotel maid who fled to Lisara to escape the harem of a local village chief. While there, she met and married Alberi Bemani, a cook for a Belgian judge, and shortly afterwards she gave birth to Mobutu. But sadly, Mobutu's father passed away when he was 8. As a young child, Mobutu was rebellious and had itinerant education at the hands of Catholic monks who were impressed with his intelligence and discipline. However, the impression did not last, as he was kicked out of missionary school for traveling to Kinshasa in search of women, alcohol, and adventure, for which he was banished to the army. In 1956, after serving in the Belgian Congolese army, he became a full-time journalist, and it's around this time that he became friends with Patrice Lumumba and joined Lumumba's Mouvement National Congolais, MNC. When Lumumba became prime minister after independence, Mobutu was chosen to be his personal secretary. He was later elevated to chief of staff of the Congolese army in the 1960s during the Congolese crisis, making him the third most strongest person in the country at the time. The crisis emerged due to a socialist violence in the south, provoked by a Belgian government who were the former colonial masters, determined to preserve its access to rich Congolese mines and natural resources. During the crisis, Lumumba turned to the Soviet Union for assistance and received massive military aid. However, this was a threat to the US, which saw the Soviet involvement in the Congo as a ploy to spread communist influence in Central Africa. Joseph Kasavubu, the president at the time, angered by Soviet presence, dismissed Lumumba, and in turn Lumumba did the same to Kasavubu. Both Lumumba and Kasavubu then ordered Mobutu to arrest the other. Given he was the chief of staff, he was expected to handle the situation. However, Mobutu and Kasavubu's aides were bankrolled by Western governments, as well as the soldiers, so they decided to rid the country of Soviets to impress their funders. On September 14, 1960, Mobutu took control of the DRC in a CIA-sponsored coup. He placed Lumumba under house arrest and accused him of pro-communist sympathies. To further appease and gain US support, he ordered all Soviet advisors to leave the Congo and kept Kasavubu as president. At this point, Mobutu had established himself as the strongest man in the Congo, though he wasn't yet the head of state, just yet. When Lumumba fled the capital 2 months later, he was arrested and killed in February 1961. Mobutu, the Belgians, and the CIA denied any involvement. However, evidence later surfaced that suggested the opposite. In the communist world, Lumumba was honored as a martyr, and protests took place in different parts of the world. In 1965, a constitutional crisis developed in which Prime Minister Moise Tshombe and the President Joseph Kasavubu wrestled for power. Mobutu saw an opportunity and launched a successful coup that toppled Kasavubu and quickly established himself as dictator and the head of a one-party state, the MPR, Popular Movement for the Revolution. After seizing power, Mobutu quickly found means to keep and entrench himself in power. He started by setting a dictatorial tone, telling a large crowd gathered in Kinshasa Stadium that politicians had ruined the country. He said, "This is why on November 24, 1965, the stupid struggle for influence in which political parties were engaged was ended. For 5 years, there will be no more political party activity in the country." Mobutu. Mobutu's early years in office were a period of relative calm. Many of Mobutu's harshest critics acknowledge one achievement. See, the Congo has 450 ethnic groups that had French as an official language but no commonly spoken tongue. Mobutu managed to forge a sense of nationhood in Africa's largest country. This was accomplished in part by successfully promoting the use of 3 major African languages, Lingala, Swahili, and Shoruba, to draw citizens together across ethnic lines. At the same time, Zaire experienced a period of extraordinary cultural creativity in song, fashion, and art. This came about partly as a result of deliberate efforts to favor local influences over foreign ones. Such policies made Mobutu popular among the masses. Dubbed the master calculator, Mobutu employed more strategies to maintain his grip on power. These included the military, nationalistic ideology, and notably the philosophy of Mobutuism. The philosophy was difficult to pin down in terms of economic matters, as it was liberal but also Maoist in social control, anti-communist but also anti-capitalist. There were bits of pieces here and there, a political stew in which he tossed every ingredient he chose. He welcomed continued support from America while at the same time traveling to Beijing for inspiration. He renamed the Congo and its cities. Congo became Zaire, Leopoldville became Kinshasa, and Stanleyville became Kisangani. In 1971, Mobutu launched a new twist to the official ideology with a program known as Authenticity. In these changes, Zairians were obliged to change their Western names to African ones, drop titles like Mr. and Mrs. in favor of citizen, and abandon European dress codes for tunics for men and wraps of printed cloth for women. Also, Western-style attire was banned and replaced with the Mao-style tunic labeled the abacus and its female equivalent. The people had to be Christian and were to abandon their Christian names for more authentic ones, which had to sound tribal for Mobutu's liking. He sought to set the tone by replacing his given name, Joseph Desire Mobutu, with Mobutu Sese Seko Kukumbendu Wazabanga, meaning the all-conquering warrior who, because of his endurance and inflexible will to win, will go from conquest to conquest, leaving fire in his wake. In 1973, Authenticity was followed by Zairianization, a program that seized all farms, factories, and businesses belonging to foreigners. From Belgians, Greeks, Jewish, and Pakistani traders who had dominated much of the country's small-scale commerce. The country's economy was given away like a goodie bag at a children's party, and only Mobutu's faithful supporters were invited. Shopkeepers were given factories that produced their goods. A musician was given a shopping mall. Overnight, a governor of Katanga was said to have become the owner of nearly all businesses in his province. With this, he created a sprawling culture of patronage. As for Mobutu, he would require an exceptional reward for this program. Well, because he is Mobutu, he treated himself to 14 plantations and dipped into the country's mining industry as he pleased. In a speech on November 30th, 1973, Mobutu described the new policy as a decisive turning point in our history and justified it by calling Zaire the country which until now has been the most heavily exploited in the world. But in reality, this was just a series of populist decrees designed to distract the people from the more pressing concerns on where the money was going. The nationalizations and handing out of businesses to politically selected Zairians were in...
This is how the economy came crashing down after all the all the companies were taken, all the resources were actually taken and are given out to friends, all the close circle over the President Mobutu's circle. But of course, when he actually said that people do not have wear Western attires, they would of course also change their names and have more African names. It was a move, I believe, that was also inspired when he actually went to China, Beijing, and he was trying to get some inspiration there. But nonetheless, he said something to be true, that the DRC has been one of the most exploited places in the world. You know, everyone else comes into the DRC, gets whatever they want, while the people of the DRC themselves are not getting anything in return for their resources.
Initially popular, it was not long before things began to backfire. With almost no prior experience in the businesses they inherited, many Zairians quickly sought to lure foreigners back to run them in their place, and others just simply sold off their goods and failed to restock. One cannot mention Mobutu without discussing the Cold War. He was the strongest Cold War ploy in Africa in his era. At the height of the Cold War, Mobutu thrived on crises, buying off enemies when he did not kill them outright. He used crucial financial aid from foreign allies with ranging strategic, economic, political, and commercial interests in Africa due to the strategic location of the Congo. His chief patron was the United States, which provided $2 billion in foreign assistance. In return, Washington got a secure base for operations in neighboring Angola, where Western-backed unitary rebels were locked in a long civil war with Marxist governments supported by Cuban troops and Soviet arms. France, Morocco, and Belgium were also key Mobutu allies, who at crucial points both sent paratroopers to help in suppressing revolts. In return, France was granted a base in his country for operations in Chad and elsewhere in its former African empire. Like Stalin in the Soviet Union and Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Mobutu consolidated his power by developing a cult of his own personality. Pictures of him were printed by tens of thousands and sent to every part of the country. Every word of his was recorded. He was the only official voice of Zaire. His hold over Zairians was almost mystical. In a land where superstition is an important part of the culture, it was rumored that the carved black walking stick he always carried in public had magical powers, that it was so heavy a normal person could not lift it. While exalting himself, he purposely kept the army weak, although there was a well-paid and well-armed military auxiliary called the Presidential Division, which he trusted for his protection. Nothing defined Mobutu's regime as corruption, gaining a fortune estimated between $5 billion to $10 billion. Graft was Mobutu's first choice as a way of rewarding friends and disarming opponents. Stealing was so widespread that the word kleptocracy was coined to describe his regime. In a speech in 1977, Mobutu described his country by saying, "Everything is for sale. Anything can be bought in our country." He suggested that it should only be done discreetly, saying, "If you want to steal nicely, steal a little. But if you steal too much to get rich overnight, you will be caught." Mobutu aimed to use the state for his own enrichment and his family. In the 1970s, 15 to 20% of the operating budget of the state went directly to Mobutu. In 1977, Mobutu's family took $71 million from the National Bank for personal use, and by the early 1980s, his fortune was estimated at $5 billion, making him the world's richest head of state and the 8th richest man in the world at the time. Mobutu had extensive holdings in Zaire as well as deposits and estates in Europe. For visits abroad, he sometimes chartered a Concorde. In the 1980s, he imported 5,000 sheep from Venezuela for one of his ranches. He did this by ordering government-owned DC-8 to make 32 round trips between Caracas and Zaire. His most ambitious project was the rebuilding of his ancestral village of Badolite. Badolite's most famous son, Mobutu, constructed 2 lavish palaces, one for hosting affairs of the state and a private residence and a village of Chinese pagodas.
Actually, in Bagolito, what happened is that he actually also set up in his home village. He actually set up an airport. And of course, this particular airport did not serve any commercial use because there were no people flying out from this particular airport, which he built in his hometown. It was actually sort of a private one, but it was built in a way that it looked like a public project. But this was a way of siphoning almost everything that was coming, all the resources are in the DRC.
These shrines were stuffed with Italian marble, antique French furniture, Venetian chandeliers, expensive tapestries, and monogrammed silver cutlery. Fashionable chefs and Parisian pastry and Belgian mussels were flown in from the capital cities of Europe. Badolite's airstrip was extended to accommodate a Concorde, which Mobutu would charter from Air France. The sailors burst with thousands of bottles of pink champagne and vintage wine. It almost took 1,000 expensively uniformed staff to keep the palaces in shape. Guests included Pope John Paul II, Boutros Ghali, several French presidents, and a who is who of questionable businessmen. It is estimated that Mobutu spent up to $400 million on his Badolite palaces. The story of Mobutu's wealth and riches would require a full episode that we shall have to look into the future. Under his leadership, a nation with seemingly unlimited prospects became one of the poorest in the world. By the late 1980s, per capita income was less than a tenth of what it had been at independence. In the 1990s, the degree of poverty dropped below measurable levels. Hyperinflation rendered the currency worthless and barter trade became the usual means of exchange. In the context of Cold War, Mobutu's abuse of human rights counted less for Washington than his anti-communist credentials. Mobutu first became an asset of the CIA in 1959 during a meeting in Brussels. He later met several US presidents, including Ronald Reagan, who twice welcomed him to Washington and called him a voice of good sense and goodwill. By the early 1990s, however, the conditions that had made him a valuable ally had changed. The great rivalry between Washington and Moscow had been settled in Washington's favor, and the US diplomats began to suggest that time had come for Mobutu to step aside. As Cold War era leaders around him began to fall, Mobutu hung on with promises of reform, but his pledge in 1990 to hold multi-party elections was never fulfilled. Furthermore, opposition matches were made.
Go ahead is believing to make each day a brighter day.
With military force. In 1991 and 1993, riots by Zairean army, which had not been paid, tipped the situation into a free-fall crisis. Kinshasa and other cities were looted with heavy loss of life. As he grew even more isolated, Mobutu spent most of his time in Badolite, living on a yacht on the river Zaire. The end of Mobutu came with surprising speed after the Rwandese Tutsi-led government supported an uprising by the Congolese Tutsi, who had come under attack in eastern Zaire. In October 1996, 3 weeks into the fighting, what had been a Tutsi uprising turned into a full-blown political rebellion against Mobutu, led by Kabila. Once Kabila's forces seized In the major cities of the Congo in the Far East, African leaders with scholars to settle against Mobutu lined up to help the rebels with money, men, and arms. The anti-Mobutu coalition came to include Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Angola, where Mobutu had interfered the most in 3 decades of his rule. When Bill Richardson, the US delegate to the United Nations and President Clinton's special envoy, visited Zaire to hear Mobutu's resignation, the aging cancer-ridden president asked him why, after years of loyal service and friendship with the West, he had been abandoned. Richardson replied, "I said the mess you are in is not our mess. You just didn't govern your own country." Mobutu went into temporary exile in Togo until President Gnassingbé Eyadema insisted that he leave the country. Soon after, he went to Morocco, where he owned several homes. While there, he sought permission to travel to France for treatment for prostate cancer, a request the French government refused. Instead, the frail Mobutu was admitted to a military hospital in Rabat and died in September 1977 at the age of 66. He was buried in an above-ground mausoleum at Rabat Saleh in Christian cemetery. On the same day Mobutu fled into exile, Laurent Désiré Kabila became the new president of Zaire.
That is a brief history of how things actually went down in this nation known as the Congo. And of course, it's very, very sad to see that President Olaman, of course, this was a CIA agent. He was a CIA agent actually from 1959. And even when he was made the Secretary of State, or the equivalent in this particular country, what happened is that he had divided loyalty. You know, it was either he goes with Joseph Kasavumbu, or he actually supports Patrice Lumumba. And what he decided really was for him, Patrice Lumumba was of course getting support of the Soviets, and Kasavumbu was getting the support of the US, and therefore they decided that they will go with the support of Kasavumbu, and that is how they actually led, or actually ordered for the murder of Patrice Lumumba, who of course was the man who had the idea or the vision for this particular country. But nonetheless, the CIA will not have it. The CIA actually also was involved with this particular coup. Angela Morris, thank you so much for joining us. I believe it's so early wherever you are, but nonetheless, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Happy New Year to you. And also KW Dawn, you saying the assassination of Patrice Lumumba was the most vital blow to the African liberation. Yes, it was. For him, what did happen is that, for this individual who is the president, did actually Mobutu Seko. Of course, he was working in the interest of the interest of the US, being a CIA asset. And what happened eventually, even when he was being kicked out from that documentary, you could hear him saying that after years of loyal service to the US, after years of loyal service to the CIA, they have actually deserted him. And he was told that he's your own mess. You did not govern your own country. But he had actually said that anything is for sale. That is what he had said. Anything is for sale in this particular nation, which is the DRC. And that is, someone selling out the country even on, outrightly. He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't hiding what he was doing. But the people I also blame it on the people of the DRC. I believe even the people that he was leading. What was happening is that, for loyalty, he was actually giving out people, land. He was giving out people buildings. He was giving out businesses. And the people who actually handed over, the people to whom these businesses were handed over, most of these people did not have any knowledge on how to run businesses, did not have any knowledge on how to run the farms, did not have any knowledge on how to do anything. And therefore, at the end of the day, these businesses failed. And therefore, the economy came down, came crashing down again. And Baron Scott, you saying Matt, love to the family, Kid New Sounds Spike to William. Where the hell have you been? I've been looking for. Baron Scott, you had a problem with the other channel, but also I hope that you all doing well. Happy New Year to you. I do hope that this particular year brings opportunities. I hope that this particular year brings opportunities for all of us. KW Don, Kay Williams, Keith, also who else? Let me see. Your name is particularly difficult, but these are Gio saying, a grand rising, beloved black man, you were truly missed. Good to hear the voice of reason amongst all of us and all the accusations and madness coming from the mouth of Black America armchair activist. And Gio, I hope that you are still with us, and thank you so much. Is it someone from have you changed your name, or are you a new member of the family? Are you a new member of the Black Far family? But your name is particularly difficult to pronounce, so I'll just call you Gio. The other name is particularly difficult to pronounce. KW, how are things going with you in Canada? How are things for you? I understand that, different countries do have the New Year, do get into the New Year at different times because of time differences. And I believe Canada is one of the countries that is very, very late, when it comes to crossing over into 2021. But nonetheless, I do hope that this particular year brings good tidings, and opportunities for all of us, either for growth, for prosperity, and all these other aspirations that you do have as human beings. Kidder Bidon says Mobutu was the biggest traitor to African liberation in the 20th century. He embezzled billions of dollars from the treasury for his personal use. Yes, from what I understand, I think that was even 700 million he was using for his parties, and he would actually fly out a whole, a whole team of performers from France. All this money was going into France, and then he would order some of the best Italian designs, and then he would put them in these palaces. And all the money was actually going out to everywhere else, apart from Zimbabwe itself. Apart from the DRC Congo itself. And of course, what do you expect? Him being an agent, a CIA agent from 1959, all the money and all the resources were actually going also to benefit these particular presidents that were also coming in and enjoying his palace. And from what you could hear, some of his guests in these palatial homes also include the Pope. The Pope also did not see anything wrong with the murder of the people and the abuse of human rights in this particular country. All he could care for is some of these resources in the DRC as well, and that is some of the individuals that did make it to the guest list. Most of these parties that were being held in these palatial homes, some of the individuals, these are businessmen. These are thieves. These are not actually businessmen. These are thieves, people coming out and looting the most they could. From a man, I also understand he was chased out from school because his character, one of the things that was lacking with Mobutu Sese was character. The man did not have any character. And for him, he was saying, you would rather steal a little and do not steal a lot, because if you steal a lot, he will catch up with you. But he himself, he did not have any problem with stealing a lot or stealing everything that was the resource, even with the banks. And at some point, he was trying to, make the image or try to paint a different picture of the country. I believe this was in 1974 when he was hosting. Was it in 74 or 78? When he did host the Rumble in the jungle. And for him, he was actually rolling. He actually made it. He actually made it in a way that the image that people could only see on the television sets. Back then, I know not many people did have television sets in the 1960s, the late 60s, and the early 70s. But for him, what was happening is that they would be printed, the papers would be printed and circulated to the homes, with the image. And he was made to be some sort of a god or a demigod in this particular country where everything was on sale. Everything was on sale. He could care less about what you're buying it for. And he also admitted the country being the most exploited. And even if he knew the country was the most exploited, he did not do anything in the interest of his own people. These are the kinds of individuals that should have actually been taken out the very, very first day. But of course, they had the backing of the CIA, and because they were the doorkeepers. I believe they were the gatekeepers. And these are individuals, of course, who are, of course, involved in the looting of this particular country. Nonetheless, we shall be discussing about other different issues happening. Canada is in a second round of a lockdown due to the pandemic. It's crazy. Even in Africa, we have seen other different, for example, Kenya. There has been the extension. There has been the extension of the curfew. They are saying that the curfew now has been extended to the 12th of March. And I'm saying that last year was difficult, but we are still not out of the woods even this year. People better make New Year resolutions that will last. Looking at the financial plans that you have for this particular year, you better make them very, very early in the year, because things are not even looking any good. Listen, good to see you, Spike. You do a great job. Keep up, my brother. Thank you so much. I hope that you are well, Baron Scott. And Angela Morris says, I missed you while you were gone. I missed you too, Sister Angela Morris. I do not know whether we shall still get the opportunity this year, Sister Angela, to go to Tanzania. Of course, Tanzania is open for travel, but the borders and everything that's happening, the COVID, things are not yet back to normalcy as we would hope. And therefore, Kid will be updating us on how the plans go. We might get the opportunity to travel, or we shall look at how things go and see if it's possible this year to make that particular trip to Tanzania as we had hoped for last year. You know, we went to Tanzania with the Black Watfire family, sister Nishpenda, Jiman, Kami, and we also hoping to have our sister Angela Morris join us. But then the COVID came and everything, you know, everything was a mess. But nonetheless, we shall be on the lookout and see what is possible and what is not possible. But I would wish that we did get the opportunity to travel and go back to Tanzania. But nonetheless, that is, we shall look at things and see how things go. Baron Scott, you saying KW Don, are you too, my brother? Okay, that was a shout out to Baron KW Don by Baron Scott. Now we go back to the matters of what is happening with Mozambique. You know, Mozambique is one of the countries. Let me just start with the positives. Mozambique is one of the countries with the best beaches. You know, it's a country that is endowed with some of the best beaches in Africa. It has one of the longest coastlines as well. If you want to enjoy some beautiful beaches in Africa, I believe Mozambique will be one of the countries that perhaps you might consider. We also do have Somalia. Somalia has the longest coastline in Africa, but these are two countries that have been in chaos. Have been in chaos for a minute, and since 2018. There has been an Islamic insurgency. That has resorted to, people being internally displaced. So many people being internally displaced in a place called Cabo Delgado. And when you're talking about Cabo Delgado is a place where we have had, also expatriates, calling back their own people. For example, I believe some of the oil mining companies have called back their own people into their countries because of the instability in these areas, the Cabo Delgado area. And what you get to realize is that the insurgency has been driven by some forces that have been fighting to establish an Islamic state in this region. Let me see if I can share with us the map of this region, which is Cabo Delgado. Let me see if I can share the images of this area, so that you can actually get to see what is happening with the place where we do have these Islamic insurgents fighting. And it's very sad to see that also the neighboring countries have also sort of been quiet or silent about what is happening in Cabo Delgado, because I believe this is a matter of interest, not just to Mozambique or the Mozambican people. I believe this is also a matter of interest for the Tanzanian people, because at this particular area, this is Cabo Delgado from what you can see. I hope you can see my screen. There has been more than 15,000 people being displaced. There have been more than 15,000 people being displaced from Cabo Delgado area. And of course, what has been happening is that for a long time, we have not had a militia history or a militant, what can I call them? A terrorist insurgents in areas such as Tanzania and Mozambique. In Tanzania itself, we do not have any active terrorist groups that have been known for the last, for a long time. But what has happened, you move all the way from Somalia, you can actually move all the way from Somalia and cross over from Somalia, get to Kenya, because Kenya and Somalia, they're neighboring countries, Kenya and Somalia, and then move from Kenya all the way down to Tanzania. And then from Tanzania, now you get to Mozambique. From Tanzania, this is Tanzania here, then you get to Mozambique. And this is the area where we have had fighting, and this has been claimed by the Islamic group or the terrorist group. And these terrorist groups have been affiliated to the Islamic State. And the insurgency is an ongoing conflict in Cabo Delgado province in Mozambique, mainly fought between the Islamic militants and who are attempting to establish the Islamic State in the region, and the Mozambican security forces and civilians have been the main target for these particular attacks. And therefore, that is why I'm saying in this area we have had the displacement of more than 15,000 people in Mozambique, and all these people have fled into the neighboring countries to go and find, their safety. And KW is saying Mobutu put African garb on like a costume. He was European at heart. You know what happened? The irony for him, he was telling people that they should revert from the European names and also using the European languages, and now start adopting 3 main languages. Lingala was one of them, also Swahili, and one other language in this particular country of the Congo. But at the same time, he sold out his people, and then he even went to Beijing. He was going to China, and he sort of wanted to adapt a Mao Chinese kind of system. He wanted to adopt a Chinese kind of a system for his own people, where he says, okay, we're turning back from the West, and we want to have our own names, we want to have our own languages. We do have about 150 tribal groups or ethnic groups in the DRC Congo, and he wanted to bring them together, just like we did have in the Chinese people being brought together. But in his heart, he was actually just a European puppet. At the end of the day, he was just a European puppet who actually was selling out the resources of his own people to the highest bidder. He didn't care whether it's the Chinese coming, whether it's the Soviets, whether it's the US coming in and taking out the resources, the Europeans coming out and taking the resources. For him, it was the resources for the highest bidder. And I believe even at the end of the day, because of the abundance of resources, he did not really care how much these resources were actually going out for. Spikes its eyes as red amber jewel. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I was trying to pronounce the name, but thank you so much for being part of the Blackwood Fan Network. I hope that this particular year also favors all of us, and like you said, I'm wishing all of us good tidings even as we start. But it's crazy to see that the problem does not just lie in the lack of leadership in this particular continent, because we do have so many problems that ail the African continent. And one of the things that has been the problem of leadership has been one of the biggest. And because of the leaders who do lack character, for example, Mobutu Seko is a man who goes out and says this and does the exact opposite. When he is in public, he says, about caring for the people, wanting people to have their own Africanacity, if I might call it so, and leave the ways of the European and go back to their own African systems. And at the end of the day, for he himself, he's actually a European puppet. And he did not have, when you go out there and say something and do the exact opposite, I believe you might have internal conflicts with yourself. You might not have peace with yourself. But at the end of the day, that could, Mobutu Seko would care less about, having peace with himself as he sold out, Oh, it's here like fine wool. I was wondering. Yes, it's here like fine wool, skin like burnt bronze. YouTube snaps my page, so I say that break the social guidelines, but frankly, I don't give a damn for YouTube. For YouTube is not the boss of being black. It's black first always. I will be checking out your new platforms. I will check out your new platforms. Here like fine wool, asking like burnt bronze. I will also try follow back and cut on the vibe and the work that you are doing as well, because I also believe that you do have some material out that is also instrumental, and we can also share. Samora Machel is the former president of Mozambique, was killed by a mysterious plane crash caused by the apartheid government of South Africa. Yes, I do remember sharing that particular story and the history of Samora Machel. And then I believe the wife was also taken. I believe the wife was taken by, the wife. That was a Gracia Machel, or Grace. Let me just call her Grace Machel. She was taken by the president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. She moved from being the wife of the president of Mozambique to becoming the wife of the president of South Africa. And also, even till today, I did share with us a particular documentary and the story behind the investigation that took place after the murder, because I will call it the murder because that is what it is. He was taken out. It did not just happen by chance. And KW Don, I see you do have all that information. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. What did happen? I believe there was involvement of the South African government, and not just the South African government, but even other external foreign forces, in the taking out of Samora Machel, who was the president of Mozambique. And even as we're speaking right now, I do believe that there is a plan, not just to destabilize Mozambique itself, but even to extend further up and go into Tanzania, because Tanzania, like I said, has been relatively stable. And not many people want the sovereignty of Tanzania to stand as it is, and not just the sovereignty, but even the peace and stability. Tanzania has been peaceful and stable for a minute. And of course, also the first president of Tanzania, of course, did have his Soviet allies. That was Dr. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who did have his Soviet allies, and therefore he did sort of introduce socialism, socialism in Tanzania. But right now, I believe the fighting or the insurgency in Mozambique might not be really the end goal. The end goal really might also be trying to move up and sort of destabilize Tanzania, because, like I said, the Tanzanian people should also pay attention to what is happening in Mozambique and also intervene. Right now, we do have the incoming president of Mozambique. He goes by the name Filipe Nyusi. But Filipe Nyusi has not been seen to be, getting a hold of the matters. It seems like everything is out of control for him. But I do believe the government has the potential. I believe the government has the potential to address this matter of the Islamic insurgency in Mozambique. I know Mozambique is a poor country because it has not been able to get its house in order. But I do believe even if Mozambique was to ask for some assistance, and get into a convention, I know it's a sovereign state, but if it were to ask for some assistance in the neighboring countries, such as Angola, such as Tanzania, I do believe it would be able to do a much better work. We also do have Zimbabwe, we also do have Malawi, which are the neighboring countries. But yes, his wife married the traitor Nelson Mandela. Yes, that is exactly what happened. But I'm saying Mozambique, if Mozambique was really interested in actually addressing this particular matter, then I believe it would. Because if I show us some of the images, you will actually see what is happening, which is very shameful to share. And this is the Islamic insurgency, which has called for a state of war declaration in Mozambique. You can see some of the families, the civilians are the most affected. The civilians are actually the most affected on the ground. And even as we're speaking, this fighting was also taking place earlier last year. Like I said, it started in July 2018, around June, July 2018. And we did have the attacks in March 2019. And these attacks have been irregular, such that the people right now have been forced to move out of their own homes. But the government has failed its people. Like I said, we have the president, Filipe Nyusi. He has failed its people. And a major opposition party in Mozambique has called on the government to declare a state of war in the northern part of the country, where the Islamic insurgency has been going on for several years, like I said, since 2018. And this is a place known as Cabo Delgado. The president of the Democratic Movement of Mozambique, the third largest party in the country, said that such a move would mobilize the international community to provide assistance to the Mozambique government and its fight against the armed Islamic groups in Cabo Delgado province. But you ask yourself, I shared with us an image. I shared with us the image. You ask yourself, how are these Islamic militants operating in this particular country? How are they getting in their weapons? Because, of course, this is the area that we're talking about. If they are able to make sure that there are not any weapons coming from this area, and also they also try and make sure that there is not any infiltration. I believe Tanzania has not been used as a channel. I believe Tanzania is not being used as a channel from which people are moving, because I believe some of them perhaps are moving from Somalia, coming down from Somalia to Kenya, Kenya to Tanzania, and Tanzania to Mozambique. That will be the only way the Islamic militants would move, because I believe most of them have their bases in Somalia, and that is why we do have Somalia being destabilized for all this long. But nonetheless, I do believe the government would be in a position also to, of course, incorporate some assistance from to ask for some assistance from Tanzania. I believe Tanzania might be willing, because if they do not address this matter as early as possible, then the Islamic insurgency will also find its way and get into Tanzania, and that is a thing that the Tanzanian government, I am sure, they do not want to have. That particular problem, get into their own country. But nonetheless, we shall keep tabs and get to see what happens with our particular end. We shall be keeping tabs on the 54 Correspondence show. We shall be updating you. We are lacking proper leadership on the African continent, but I believe at the same time, the African youth will also start rising up and realizing that we do not need these kind of leaders that do not give a damn what happens with our future. Most of them are bought and paid for. If you go to Mozambique right now and look at the history, the governance and leadership history in this particular country, you do find that there is also a big gap of leadership that is focused on the people or the interests of the people. Most of the times, it's leadership that is focused on pleasing the masters, the former colonial masters. And this is also leadership that is focused on, selling out the nation to the highest bidder. That is the kind of a leadership that we do have right here on the African continent. But if people came together, and also if we did have a spotlight, for example, the African Union, giving some spotlight on what is happening in Mozambique, then perhaps we would have a resolution. We would have, we can now start charting a solution towards a particular problem. On the subsequent episode of the 54 Correspondent, we shall also be talking about Niger. Niger is a country in West Africa that has also had the same kind of a challenge, the Islamic militants insurgency. And Niger, when you're talking about Niger, we are hearing about many people being murdered. Many people being killed in Niger because of the Islamic militant attack. And this is just as recent. This is very, very recent. We are hearing about the killing of dozens of civilians in this particular nation because of the gun attack, the gun attacks by the Islamic militants. And this is just 2 days ago, where we did have the killing of about 100 people being murdered in Niger. But that we shall address in the subsequent episode of the 54 Correspondence Show, and I'll just update you on what is happening. But that will be addressed, like I said, in the subsequent episode. But you hear this is more than 100 dead civilians that have been killed because of the border regions century. Once again, I want to wish you a happy and prosperous 2021. And of course, thank you so much for joining us on the 54 Correspondence Show. We had a bit of a hit there, but nonetheless, I was telling us that on the subsequent episode of the 54 Correspondence Show, I will be talking about the nation of Niger, which actually is, it shares almost same name with Nigeria, but that is Niger. And what is happening, the conflict right there in that particular West African country. There is a problem when it comes to the issue of security in the West African region, and this has been as a result of the Islamic insurgency that of course wants to turn this particular area an Islamic state, which is I think that the governments are actually trying to put up a concerted effort to, of course, push back on this Islamic insurgency in West Africa. But nonetheless, our area of focus for today was Mozambique. And even as we talk about the insurgency also in Mozambique, there's some wonderful things to see in Mozambique. Like the beaches in Mozambique, they're wonderful. But nonetheless, the governments need to address this particular matter of the insurgency before it gets crazy. Let me show us just an image. Sometimes you talk about Africa and you might think Africa is the worst because of all these issues. But nonetheless, let me show us a little bit of the beauty of Mozambique, in case you're wondering where Mozambique is, just right next to Tanzania. And these are some wonderful places. For example, these are holiday beaches in Mozambique. This is also a wonderful place that you might go and see some of the beaches, some of the lodges in this particular wonderful country. But nonetheless, there has been fighting, and I was saying that I do hope the government in Mozambique gets to address this matter before it gets out of hand. You'd rather even have a unified force, which might constitute Mozambique, the Mozambican forces, as well as other neighboring forces. And also we have felt at the level of the top African leadership level, which is the African Union. These as also we have also failed in that particular regard, because we would have already addressed this particular matter on what is happening. But nonetheless, much peace and love. I want to wish you a happy and productive day ahead, as well as a prosperous 2021. Thank you so much. We appreciate your support. As a Black Fire family, you are valued. Your support is not in vain. And also taking the time and giving us your company right here, we do appreciate all of that. And we hope to even get to grow this particular year as a Black Fire network. That is our aspiration. I don't know what your aspirations are for the year. But nonetheless, in whatever endeavors that you choose to pursue this year, I want to wish you nothing but the best and nothing but success. Till next time, much peace and love. I want to say kwaheri.